Hello and welcome back to Dan Cave, and welcome back to the Tamiya 112 scale Suzuki RGV video build series. So this is part 3. Part 3 is going to cover the decals. So not a hugely long video. I think it's about a 30-minute mark, give or take. So the previous part covered a little bit of the bodywork, prep and paint in part 1, swing arm in part 2, we're on to decals. So as I said before, I mean, this is pretty much going to cover every kind of bit of the build as I progress through it. So it stalled a little bit, had a few issues, you'll see some of them in the video. Sorted that out, carried on, but because I was distracted with some other builds, it's kind of sat, pretty much left alone in the state you'll see it at the end of this video. So that's kind of where it is at the moment. Yeah, so let's crack on into the video and see what progress we make on the decals. So I'd like to thank everyone for watching. Thanks for joining. Please drop a like if you can. Please subscribe, and if you feel like you want to leave a comment, whatever you like, questions, yeah, comments, just show that interaction, and they're good for a channel, and I do enjoy reading them as well. So yeah, so thanks for watching. Put your feet up, sit back, enjoy the rest of the show, and I'll come back a little bit later for a bit of a chat. Thanks. And here we go. Decals. Today is all about the decals. So as you can see with this kit, there's actually 2 sheets. One covering most of the kind of coloured parts for the fairing and tank, etc. And then a few other bits for numbers, exhaust, some of the sponsors, etc. So I'm starting with the fuel tank today. And that basically has got 3 individual pieces which need to join seamlessly. There is a 4th piece which goes in the middle, which covers the little cutout on the top of the tank. So I started with the side pieces. I really should have started with the top piece. It would have made getting the seamless join a little bit easier, because that's obviously one piece that I can get perfectly positioned, and then get the side pieces in to sit perfectly. For some reason I didn't do that. I decided to go with the side pieces first. Mainly probably because I thought get the alignment where they meet at the back of the tank correct first. But there we go. I did it this way, but it seemed to work okay. So it's kind of the normal kind of decal process, you know, sit them in warm water for 10 to 20 seconds using micro set. But as these are Tamiya decals, I do find that a hairdryer comes in very useful. So that's used to basically help heat the decals up a little bit, and that helps soften them, so they tend to start to conform a little bit better. So once those side ones are on and there's not really much sharp angles or, you know, conforming to do on them, I then get the top section on. That does need a little bit more working to work the creases out, etc. So once again, it's starting with micro set, then progressing to microsol, and then slowly working my way up to the UMP stronger decal solutions. So as you can see, I'm trying to get that transition, that join between the decals perfect, so there's no gap, which is pretty close, pretty much spot on. And now just starting to try and work some of those creases out. So once I'm generally happy with it's going down, I'm using cotton bud to help expel any excess moisture, whether it's water or decal solution. And then going back with more decal solutions just to try and soften a little bit more and get the decal to perfectly conform to the tank shape. So in reality, I mean, I think this tank alone probably took a couple of hours. Sometimes you need to leave them sit, take a step back, and then go back to it. So once they've had, for three decals, have had a little bit of chance to sit, I can then add the centerpiece. Now that's obviously got to sit in basically a convex shape, so that needs a lot of decal solution to get it to conform. So again, I will use the hairdryer on that, which is, I'll do that off screen. You don't really need to see me sat there with a hairdryer blasting a decal with some warm air. Now, Tamiya decals do have a tendency to crack quite easily. They don't stretch as well as some of the others. But in this case, I think we've done all right. So I've now speeded up the footage just because there's a lot of work to get through and a lot of decals to get through. So we continue working on the tank, adding in the additional kind of intermediate blue stripes or metallic blue stripes. So they go on fairly easy, very little kind of conforming for them. There's no real sharp edges for them to go over. But again, still a little bit of work just to make sure that they do sit down perfectly. So all the while you're kind of going through this, it's also looking back at the diagrams, checking for alignment, make sure they actually sit in exactly the right place. And with any kind of complex scheme, you're always kind of keeping an eye out for, is there anywhere where they need to kind of join up or show continuity with a decal on another piece? So you're always looking at the diagram to make sure that that's correct. But overall, generally happy with that tank. So that's sat to one side, and we can start on the lower half of the fairing. So this decal is a little bit more challenging because it's pretty much got some 90-degree angles to go around at either the top end and white part. So that's got to wrap around. So that goes on reasonably okay. A little bit of hot air, decal solutions. I think I've stopped using microset because it didn't have much of an effect on the first bit. I'm pretty much going straight to UMP normal once I'm happy with its position. I think once I get that first kind of wrap around, I'll then go back with some UMP strong. And then it's the same for the other side of that fairing. So all in all, that's beginning to look pretty good. Now, one of the things, of course, with putting white decal over blue is you'll always a risk you'll get some kind of bleed through or won't be thick enough. But it looks okay at the moment. So I've set that to one side. Now time to start work on the upper and front fairing. So this has got quite a complex shape to wrap around. Also has to meet in the middle. So again, it's a case of, I won't say working on both decals at the same time, but this is not going to be fully set by the time we get onto the second part, and that always gives the option of just trying to be able to move them a little bit more just to get them to line up correctly. But again, same process, UMP normal, a little bit of hot air. You're not going to be able to move them much, but you may, certainly towards the edges, just be able to get them to line up a little bit closer. But in this case, the decals are a good size. They actually line up beautifully well and look excellent. So there's a couple more pieces to go on the sides. So that's in the lighter blue on the decal sheet. So again, that sits around that intake on the side, so it lines up to that pretty much spot on. And then the same on the other side. So all in all, this is beginning to take shape and beginning to look like the color scheme we want. I mean, sometimes when you look at the decal sheet and there's all those individual bits of blue, it can be hard to see exactly what sequence you're going to go through. But once you start and get into it, sometimes it just falls into place nicely. Now the second half of this kind of blue on the side of the fairing, so that just meets up inside the intake and kind of joins up to give that kind of swoop towards the front of the side intake. And then pretty much the same on the other side. So these ones don't need to wrap around very much. There's not a huge amount of decal solutions used on them. There is a little bit needed in and around the intake just to make sure it conforms into those shapes. And that's where the UMP Strong will come in very handy. Perfect for doing that. So now we can start working on the seat and seat hump. So there's a layer of decal on these. So there's one on either side, and then there's a colored decal. We'll go over that as well. So this gives the kind of base a carbon fiber look, and then a kind of white stripe onto which I think it's a red stripe goes over it. So this one didn't quite line up as well as I wanted, and you might be able to see that when I get to the very end piece at the back, but it wasn't as perfect as I wanted. Now in the front, just where I'm working at the moment, most of that will be covered up by the seat anyway, so any misalignment is not a problem here. So mainly I'm just worried about any alignment issues towards the back, which once I get this piece on, it's not quite perfectly aligned. But, you know, it's good enough. At this stage, I'm reasonably happy with what's been done. We'll take that one. Slight little error, but I'll live with it. So there's a few smaller decals to go on the kind of main part of the fairing. The Kenny Roberts logo and the GSXR logo. So now I'm just getting the Kenny Roberts logo on. Suzuki badge to go on the back of the seat hump. Well, tailpiece, whatever you would call it. Another one to go on the very front of the kind of main front fairing. And it's the application of UMP Strong, I think, in this case. No, probably the normal for these because they're quite flat. So we have a couple of GSXR, RGV Gamma logos. And they fit nicely into, basically there's a little cutout in the kind of blue decal that went on beforehand, which shows you exactly where it needs to go. And they just sit absolutely perfectly. So I am pretty happy with that. So we've now got the race numbers. So I'm going for the number 10 bike, which is the one that KRJR or Kenny Roberts Jr. Rode. I think that was me just gesturing to the camera because it was probably in a hangout at the time when I was doing this. So numbers go straight on, not much decal solutions needed. They're on fairly easy to conform areas, no sharp angles, no kind of deep features or anything for them to conform to. But I'll use a little bit of UMP normal, just helps them adhere a little bit better anyway. So on the seat hump / tailpiece, there is another decal to go over, which got the kind of red and blue markings. Challenge with these bits is just to make sure it lines up with where the white outline is. So this is where I realized around this time where I had a bit of a problem. I'd managed to smudge one of the decals on the lower part of the fairing. So initially I looked at some other options, you know, can I fix it, paint it, print a decal myself? Do I have any spare? No. So I had to go and order a new set of decals, which came from Hobbyco. and the only way to sort all this out was to basically strip it back to bare plastic. So I'm just using a tub of IPA and a toothbrush. So even though it's lacquer paint, it's lacquer over UMP white primer. So the IPA will strip that, no problem. A little bit of work with a toothbrush just to get it moved, but we're back to bare plastic in pretty much no time. So we'll leave that part to sit and dry for a bit, to air dry. Once I'm happy with that, it's back on with the UMP white primer. So it's white plastic, so it's really just a couple of coats. I'm not too worried about the blue staining because obviously it's going to be painted the same TS10 French blue. But certainly a couple of coats of UMP primer and just kind of flashing them off with the air from the airbrush. So they've been left to sit for 24 hours. And then we can come back with the TS10. So that was initially decanted in part 1. So the original paint job actually had some left over and was in a pot. So I was able to use that kind of spare TS10. There was just about enough left to get the remainder of this job done. So the first coat with this is going on really, really light. This is a lacquer over an acrylic. So the first coat is pretty light. Once the light coat is done, you can start to build it up a little bit more, go a little bit heavier. TS paints do like to go on quite heavy. And that's what we've done. So we've gone through, I think, 3 coats, and by the 3rd coat, it's not a full wet coat, but it is pretty heavy. So all in all, I am pretty happy with this repaint job, even though it was unplanned. And this is the final coat. I'm just making sure I've got all the angles covered, all the parts covered in French blue that I need. And that is looking good. So that is the blue coat number 3. Pretty much done. So as you can see, it's not a full wet coat. There's a little bit of a gloss on it. And I'm done. And that's pretty much all the TS10 I decanted, completely used. So that was nice and efficient. So replacement decal sheet, again, you know, as I said, Hobbyco provided, and I think, can't remember how much it cost, it was about £12 delivered, and they delivered that next day once I paid them. So brilliant service from them to send out replacement decal sheets. So it's just the lower part of the fairing that I'm going to use. So that's the main kind of Suzuki labels, a couple of sponsor logos on the bottom part. Key to this bit is don't mess it up like I did the first time around. So again, it's the same process. I have gone back to using microset this time. But same process, decals left to sit in water for 10 to 20 seconds. Get them on and then begin the process of getting them to conform. Use the hair dryer again, help heat them up and soften them. I do find that works pretty well with certainly with Tamiya's decals. You kind of have to slowly go through that progress of getting them to conform and stretch a little bit. And even then they can still crack quite easily. So UMP normal once again is used. I think at the very end I'll probably end up using a little bit of UMP strong, certainly around the edges where it has to conform around the corner. And then it's the same process for the other side. So again, I'm just making sure that all sits in around any details. And then we get the other side done. So once I'm entirely happy with those down, you notice I've mounted it slightly differently. So I'm just using a close peg at the end, just to give you something to hold on to. So I'm not tempted to touch any of the fairing directly and risk smudging another decal. So, silly mistake. It's quite rare I make mistakes like that with decals. And on this occasion, I've paid the cost because I've had to go and get more decals for it. So a couple of sponsors' logos go on. So they just drop straight in. One on either side. And then squeeze out any of the excess moisture and then check for alignment. So once that's given some bit of air to dry, there's a Michelin sponsor's logo goes over that main decal. So again, that's kind of a pretty much get in the right place first time, because you are putting a decal over a decal, so you don't really want to be moving them around too much, or because you just risk damaging the underlying decal. But they go down absolutely fine. The fit is good on the decals. All in all, pretty happy with that. So while I was doing that decal refix job, I realised I'd forgot to decal the front fender. So Suzuki logo, a couple of Michelin logos to go on that. So those couple of decals go on absolutely fine. Same process as everything else. Sit nicely over the gloss black finish I've got on the front fender, front mudguard, whatever you want to call it. So happy with that. I then also remembered there was a couple of sponsor decals, Showa decals to go on the swing arm, which we had built in part 2. So again, they're on a fairly flat surface. They'll sit down quite nicely. A little bit of decal solution just to help them adhere a little bit better. And that's pretty much it for part 3. Let's head back to me for a summary of what we've done, what I've done in part 3. So thanks for watching. So there we have it. That is the decal stage done. There'll still be a few small decals around the kind of chassis, the frame and the dash and stuff, but the majority of the kind of major decal work is done. So as you can see, a lot of the footage basically I ran through it in kind of 4 times speed. So, to basically give you a flavour of actually how much kind of time and effort go into the decal. So I mean that's edited footage, and it still was 30 minutes at 4 times speed. So you're talking about condensing definitely all day into kind of 2 hours just to kind of show you where all the decals go. So you can see the amount of effort that goes into that. So as you can see, there was a little bit of a problem along the way, entirely of my own making. I mean, Tamiya decals are notoriously difficult to work with, but you get them on right and then you make a stupid mistake by kind of smudging it with your own thumb. That's a little bit disappointing, but luckily enough it's a relatively new kit. It's a still in production kit from Tamiya, so replacement decals are readily available from Hobbyco, the UK importer. So they were quickly ordered up, delivered the day after I paid for them, actually. So I was able to keep going on that. But obviously, I had to strip the part, reprime, repaint, etc., and then redecal it. So, but everything's looking good at the moment. Not quite sure what we'll do in the next step. Certainly cover the clear coat. May cover the starting of the framework as well. But we'll see how we progress. As I said, I'm going to cover what I do, and when I think there's enough for about at least kind of 20 minutes, half an hour, I'll get a video out there. So it may just be the 2K, which I'll do in the next video. So again, it gives an opportunity to look in a little bit more detail at how I do it, and stuff like that. So thank you to everyone who's watched. Thank you if you've liked. If you've not done so, be very kind if you could. If you don't like the video, if you dislike, please leave a comment and let me know why. If you've not subscribed to the channel, please do. And thank you all for watching, and we'll see you all very soon. So thanks again. Bye bye.